7 minutes past the hour of 11 o'clock, and it was the news that they had been waiting for after years of campaigning. Yes, late on Friday, it was announced that more than 4,000 people given contaminated blood should receive immediate compensation of £100,000 each. The decision was made by the judge heading the inquiry into the scandal. Sir Brian Langstaff said there was a compelling case to make interim payments quickly. At least 2,400 people died after contracting HIV or hepatitis C through NHS treatment in the 1970s and 80s. The BBC's health correspondent Dominic Hughes reports.
Survivors of the contaminated blood scandal and their dependents have so far not had any compensation for loss of earnings, care costs or other lifetime losses until now. So this is a significant statement by the judge chairing the public inquiry into how tens of thousands of NHS patients were infected with blood-borne diseases such as hepatitis and HIV. Sir Brian Langstaff told the inquiry that he'd concluded survivors and bereaved partners should receive £100,000 now as an interim payment, rather than waiting for the inquiry to finish its work. This is only a recommendation. It's up to the government whether to accept it or not.
We can now speak with a Sussex man who has been at the forefront of the campaign for victims of the contaminated blood scandal. Mark Ward from Peacehaven was born with haemophilia and contracted both the HIV and hepatitis viruses as a child through infected blood. And he joins us this morning. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you, most importantly?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you.
That's great to hear. Just hearing that report, I guess it's a long time coming, isn't it?
Well, yeah, a whole lifetime is a long time. I mean, I'm 50 and I've spent basically most of my life in the shadow of death and fighting for answers and justice. So it has been a long time coming, and I do this for all of my friends who are no longer with me.
Yeah. Why do you think it's taken them so long? Without people like you, Mark, we wouldn't be having this conversation, quite frankly, would we?
No, we wouldn't, no. And I think, to be honest, the Sir Brian Langstaff, the inquiry's report will go into a lot more detail, but my personal belief, it's all about money. If we look back, a lot of your listeners won't understand the full sort of story behind it, but in the 1970s there was a lot of the trade in blood was a huge thing. I mean, it's even bigger today, but they were sourcing the blood from very dubious places, and it was cheap. And they used that, and then that's how a lot of people like myself, the haemophiliacs, became infected all over the world. Instead of the government saying, we got this wrong, it was easier to squash it because they then don't want to, be seen as doing wrong. Yeah. And they spent more time, money and effort on trying to discredit and squash us and drag this out because they knew that there was going to be a big bill at the end of it. And had they come clean and said, look, these mistakes have been made, this would have gone away a long time ago.
Why do you think they don't come clean in the initial stages? I guess you've touched on it there. Money's a big factor. But surely they end up spending more money trying to put the wrong things right than doing it the right way around first? Oh,
of course. And the other thing is, I have to say that this isn't just... it's the British government that have dragged this out so long. So the British government, because it was NHS treatment that we were given, that's what their involvement is. But the pharmaceutical companies themselves that were manufacturing these products back in the 70s, some of the language is so outdated, but they tended to call them skid row donors. So it was all of the people who had fallen on hard times, who were having to sell their blood to eat. Then there were alcoholics, drug addicts. They were selling their blood to fuel their addictions. And of course, then you've got if those kind of people, they're not eating and not healthy, the blood they're giving isn't healthy, and they're more likely to have a variety of different pathogens and contaminants in that blood. So of course, they were sourcing it, as well as prisoners. So prisoners, bright yellow, would be dragged in. Their blood would be taken, and that would be shipped all off around the world after it had gone through the process of making our treatment, the Factor 8 products, and it was just injected into the veins of little boys all around the world.
that image that you've just painted there for us, Mark, is quite startling, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And when you see back, there was in 1975 there was a World in Action programme, and they actually did undercover filming.
Yeah.
And there's a guy walking down the road, swigging on his bottle of whatever it was, looked like whiskey or something.
Yeah.
He stuffs it down his trousers and then goes into the blood donation centre and got paid for his blood
to fuel his addiction.
Yeah, and according to the pharmaceutical companies, nothing like that ever happened. But there it is on camera.
Yeah, it's quite a startling image, that, isn't it? Fueling their addiction. How sure can we be when people are donating their blood? We've got to be satisfied that the blood that we're receiving is quality blood, is satisfactory, is not contaminated. How can we? What is the process then, Mark? How can we be 100% unequivocal that is correct for us?
Unfortunately, you will never get 100% safe blood supply because there's always emerging pathogens. I mean, look at we've got monkeypox at the moment, so there's always things popping up. But with regards to, say, like for the haemophilia community, a majority of haemophiliacs now globally that can access treatment, there's synthetic products, so they're not blood products at all. That's not the same for the developed world. I mean, some can't even get treatment, and some still are becoming infected with HIV, hepatitis viruses, because they just haven't got access to any clean treatment.
Yeah.
There's medical advances that have been made, and thankfully the younger generations in this country of haemophiliac don't face the same dangers because they are on these synthetic treatments.
Yeah.
But the blood supply in this country, unfortunately, was never made secure. Government funding was put to one side in the 1970s by Dr. David Owen, and that money was spent elsewhere. So had they actually used the money for what it was meant to have been used for, then they would. I can safely say that there would be a lot more people in this country within the haemophilia community who would be alive today and wouldn't have been blighted by things like HIV and hepatitis.
Yeah. For anybody that's listening, can you explain to us, Mark, what it's like being born with haemophilia and what that does to you in your life?
Yes, yeah. Haemophilia is a genetic blood disorder, and the most famous haemophiliac is related to Queen Victoria. You know the story of Rasputin, the mad monk in Moscow?
Yes.
Well, he was the carer for the young prince who was a haemophiliac, and that was Queen Victoria's grandson. So when you bang yourself and you get a bruise,
yeah,
we have exactly the same. We bruise, except our bruises just get bigger and bigger because the internal bleeding just doesn't stop. So if I was to cut myself, like say if you when you're shaving, you cut yourself, it's not like blood spurts everywhere, it doesn't run everywhere, it just doesn't stop bleeding. It will be constantly dripping until I give myself my treatment, which is an intravenous injection to put the clotting factor back into the body to stop the bleeding. Where it becomes dangerous is if you bang your head, because obviously internal bleeding. I mean, when we were little boys, we were told that you don't get into fights because if somebody punches you in the stomach or hits you over the head, you'll die. And that's really how it's always been. So growing up as a child in the 70s, you couldn't ride a bike, you couldn't climb trees, you couldn't do anything that other normal little boys did. Mm-hmm. Even to the point where going to school, I was the first person in Hertfordshire, where I grew up, to go to a normal school, because haemophiliacs and others like me were sent to special schools, out of sight, out of mind. And my parents fought that and said no. I went to a normal school, but I had to have a special welfare helper that stayed within 6 feet of me at any point of the day.
Yeah.
So it was, I became the school freak. And then, of course, when AIDS came along, I just walked around with a huge target on my back because everyone knew that I was a haemophiliac, and I was in that group that were deemed to be, at risk.
Well, of course, and back in the day, there was it was taboo, wasn't it? There was the huge stigma with HIV when it first came out, because of the education and the lack of awareness that was around then. So it must have been very, very difficult.
It was, yeah. It was, yes. I mean, to say that I hated school anyway, because I just felt so different. But yes, when that hit, it was just so frightening because there wasn't anyone. The doctors told us, you tell nobody because we can't guarantee your safety. And I do know, I have friends today whose homes were set on fire. They were daubed with AIDS scum across the front of the house, cars vandalised. And one friend, his brother, was literally beaten up so much he committed suicide.
Yeah. I know I've got friends that had that years ago that had similar journeys to that, and I'm sure there's lots of people out there that will know someone who knows someone who was the unfortunate victim of those crimes. Mark, you've lived an absolutely amazing life to have the energy to go through that and the strength to be campaigning for this. You must feel very proud of yourself, Mark.
Well, we've still got a long way to go there. Thank you for that. Unfortunately, it's always tinged with sadness because somebody dies every 96 hours of contaminated blood, from contaminated blood. And so if the government do pay this, and both the prime ministerial candidates have said we should be paid immediately, even if that gets paid in September, there will be a few of my friends who will not see any of that money. It isn't the end solution. It isn't compensation. I do it because, like I said, those little boys who had their voices taken away from them, I speak for them because I can, and it's led to me to help others. Like, for instance, I have to say this because the fantastic Andy Burnham, he's trying to push through his Hillsborough law.
He's great, Andy, yeah.
I was honoured to speak at his the launch event a couple of weeks ago, and to be speaking in the same arena as sort of, people from Hillsborough and Grenfell and things like that, we came united together, and I think that's the power of it. It's people power, and like you said at the very beginning, love changes everything, we've come together with love. Yeah.
And you're not only speaking up for everybody, you're speaking up loud and clear, Mark. And it's been great talking to you this morning. Thank you for sharing that and for taking us back to your upbringing in your childhood, because I know that probably evokes some memories for you as well. So I appreciate you taking the time to do that. And the best of luck with the ongoing campaign as well. And thanks for taking the time out again today, Mark.
Thank you, and thank you for listening. Take care.
All the best. Mark Ward there from Peacehaven. He was born with haemophilia and contracted both HIV and hepatitis viruses as a child through infected blood. What a childhood you must have to go through to always be one step ahead and not being able to play. Long campaign, and it was announced on Friday that more than 4,000 people given contaminated blood should receive immediate compensation of £100,000 each. You can't put a price on life. We know that. If you've had any experience of this, or if you're concerned about this or about contaminated blood, or if there's anything that you'd like to discuss, or if you want to pick up on anything that Mark has just been talking about, they'd be interested to hear from you. 81333 on the text. Start your message with the word radio. You can WhatsApp me on 08000 321 333, or you can go old school if you want and give me a call. I'm on my email as well, kevin@bbc.co.uk, kevin@bbc.co.uk.